The J.W. Williams Funeral Directors have been proudly serving the people of this community since 1918. Service is our motto. The poor, the rich, the middle class and all are given the best of care and attention at all times. You have the privilege to select what you want. In your time of need, contact the capable, the competent, and the dependable staff of the J.W. Williams Funeral Home who is genuinely concerned with your care. At J.W. Williams Funeral Home, you are aptly served by the proprietor president, Deacon Arthur L. Parker, who continues the traditions and values set forth by the past president, Dr. Napoleon Williams. Your announcers for the J.W. Williams Funeral Home Sunday morning program are Deacon Arthur L. Parker, Reverend Isaac H. Owens, Mrs. Calandra Wilkerson Parker, Minister Frankie Harmon, Miss Sandra Johnson, and Deacon Earl Clark, Jr.
Thank you, and good morning, friends. We come to you this morning to bring announcements, dedications, and songs. We certainly hope that your day may be brighter after listening to our program. The family of Miss Everline Cheese of Rochelle, Georgia. The family of Miss Stacy D. Buckins of Americus, Georgia. The family of Miss LaPortia Rogers Brown of Cordele, Georgia. The family of Mr. Marcus Jones of Rochelle, Georgia. Would like to thank their many friends for the food, the flowers, the condolences, and all other expressions of sympathy and kindness shown to them during their hours of sorrow and bereavement during the past week. Miss Everline Cheese, age 65, of 25 Curry Street, Rochelle, Georgia, died Sunday, September 5th, at her residence in Rochelle, Georgia. The funeral service for Miss Everline Cheese, age 65, was held Sunday, September 12th, graveside at the Evergreen Baptist Church Cemetery in Rochelle, Georgia. The Reverend Gary Lucas, pastor of the New Travelers Home Baptist Church, officiated. Survivors include 4 loving and devoted children, Mrs. Nancy Walker and her husband Frederick Walker of Abbeville, Georgia, Mr. Jarrell Burks and his wife, Mrs. Roberta Burks, and Mr. Sean Cheese and his wife, Mrs. Mika Cheese, both of Cuthbert, Georgia, and Mr. Tyon Cheese of Rochelle, Georgia. 9 beloved grandchildren, 4 great-grandchildren, her beloved and devoted brothers, Mr. Ronnie Cheese and his wife, Mrs. Mary Cheese of Pitts, Georgia, Mr. Jimmy Miller and his wife, Mrs. Friendly Miller of Rochelle, Georgia, Mr. David Miller and his wife, Mrs. Melissa Miller of Cordele, Georgia, Mr. Joseph Miller and his wife, Mrs. Diane Miller of Rochelle, Georgia, and Mr. Victor Grace and his wife, Mrs. Felicia Grace of Abbeville, Georgia. Her beloved and devoted sisters, Mrs. Sandra Grace and her husband, Mr. Marcus Grace, and Miss Ruby Grace, both of Rochelle, Georgia. A host of nieces and nephews, cousins, other relatives, and many sorrowing friends survive Miss Everline Cheese, age 65, of 25 Curry Street, Rochelle, Georgia. Mrs. LaPortia Rogers Brown, age 31, 507 West Peachtree Avenue, Cordele, Georgia, died Wednesday, September 8th, at the Piedmont Atlanta Hospital in Atlanta, Georgia. The funeral service for Miss LaPortia Rogers Brown, age 31, was held Saturday, September 18th, graveside at the Bethel Cemetery in Cordele, Georgia. Her beloved cousin, Pastor LaToya Roya Coins, officiated. Survivors include her loving and devoted husband, Mr. Jackie Brown of Cordele, Georgia, her beloved children, little Zahara Brown, little Jordan Brown, little Kaylin Brown, and little Alayla Brown, all of Cordele, Georgia. Her beloved and devoted parents, Mrs. Tanya Hudson Appeal and her husband, Mr. Raymond Appeal of Cordele, Georgia, Mr. Ernest Rogers and his wife, Mrs. Maggie Rogers, her beloved sisters, Miss Tiffany Dawson of Cordele, Georgia, Ms. Alexis Franklin of Montezuma, Georgia, her beloved brother, Mr. Ernest Hudson of Atlanta, Georgia, her grandparents, Mrs. Dolores Rouse and her husband, Mr. Arnett Rouse, and Mr. Will Hudson and his wife, Mrs. Margaret Hudson of Cordele, Georgia, Mr. William Appeal and his wife, Mrs. Gertrude Appeal of Ghana, her beloved aunts and uncles, Mr. Will Hudson Jr., Mr. Ricky Hudson, Mrs. Betty Rogers, Miss Sabrina Bell, Mrs. Stacy Hartage, and her husband, Mr. Gary Hartage, Mr. Bernard Rogers and his wife, Mrs. Angela Rogers, Mrs. Christine Doster, and her husband, Mr. Charles Doster, Mrs. Laquita Williams and her husband, Mr. Billy Williams, Miss Makiba Cunningham, Mr. Condora Rouse and his wife, Mrs. Stephanie Rouse, Mr. Alex Peterson, Mr. Tony Rogers, Mr. Bernard Brooks, Miss Chantilla Collins, Miss LaShawn Hester, Miss Marcia Hester, and Mr. Cedric Hessler and his wife, Mrs. Sean Hessler. Her mother-in-law, Mrs. Tanya Goodman, her brothers-in-law, Mr. Kelvin Brown and Mr. Antonio Brown and his wife, Mrs. Kansas Barton, her beloved nieces and nephews, many cousins, other relatives, and many sorrowing friends survive. Mrs. LaPortia Rogers Brown, age 31, of 507 West Peachtree Avenue, Cordele, Georgia. Miss Stacy D. Buckins, age 37, 115 Santa Rosa Drive, Americus, Georgia, died Monday, September 13th at the Phoebe Sumter Medical Center in Americus, Georgia. The funeral service for Miss Stacy D. Buckins was held Friday, September 17th, graveside at the Lebanon Cemetery in Plains, Georgia. Elder Fletcher Williams, pastor of the Americas Pentecostal Church Apostolic, officiated. Survivors include her loving and devoted parents, Mr. Daniel and Mrs. Celinda Buckins of Americus, Georgia, her beloved grandmother, Mother Mary Battle of Plains, Georgia, her loving and devoted aunts, Mrs. LaWanda Darasol and her husband, Mr. Tony Darasol, Mrs. Tanya Evans and her husband, Mr. Curtis Evans, Mrs. Gloria Wakefield, and Miss Shonda Kennedy and her friend Tommy, all of Plains, Georgia. Her beloved uncles, Mr. James Battle of San Antonio, Texas, Mr. Marcus Battle, Mr. Rodney Battle and his friend Mika, and Mr. Jonathan Battle and his wife, Mrs. Brenda Battle, all of Plains, Georgia. Her beloved great aunts, Mrs. Mabel Streeter and her husband, Mr. Lonnie Streeter of Plains, Georgia, Mrs. Shirley Wayman of Americus, Georgia, Mrs. Irene Edge Smith of Plains, Georgia, Mrs. Jessie Williams of Americus, Georgia, Mrs. Ethel Register of Columbus, Georgia, Mrs. Virginia Sampson of Los Angeles, California, Mrs. Elaine Grant, Mrs. Bernice Scarborough of Deerfield Beach, Florida, Mrs. Nadine McDonald of Savannah, Georgia, her beloved great-uncles, Mr. Leonard Muff of Americus, Georgia, and Mr. Alvin Muff of Deerfield Beach, Florida, her beloved cousins and her devoted friends, Ms. Shanika Tatum of Americus, Georgia, and Ms. Cassandra Sanders of Macon, Georgia. A host of other relatives and friends, to include her pet whisperer, survived Miss Stacy D. Buckins, age 37, of 115 Santa Rosa Drive, Americus, Georgia. Mrs. LaPortia Rogers Brown, age 31, of 507 West Peachtree Avenue, Cordele, Georgia, died Wednesday, September 8th at the Piedmont Atlanta Hospital in Atlanta, Georgia. The funeral service for Mrs. LaPortia Rogers Brown was held Saturday, September 18th, graveside at the Bethel Cemetery in Cordele, Georgia. Her beloved cousin, Pastor LaToya Roya Cohens, officiated. Survivors include her loving and devoted husband, Mr. Jackie Brown of Cordele, Georgia, her loving children, Lila Zahara Brown, Lila Jordan Brown, Lila Kaylin Brown, and Lila Alasia Brown, all of Cordele, Georgia. Her loving and devoted parents, Mrs. Tanya Hudson Appeal and her husband, Mr. Raymond Appeal of Cordele, Georgia, Mr. Ernest Rogers and his wife, Mrs. Maggie Rogers, her loving sisters, Mrs. Tiffany Dawson of Cordele, Georgia, Miss Alexis Franklin of Montezuma, Georgia, her beloved brother, Mr. Ernest Hudson of Atlanta, Georgia, her loving grandparents, Mrs. Dolores Rouse and her husband, Mr. Arnett Rouse, and Mr. Will Hudson and his wife, Mrs. Margaret Hudson of Cordele, Georgia, and Mr. William Appeal and his wife, Mrs. Gertrude Appeal of Guana. Her beloved aunts and uncles, Mr. Will Hudson Jr., Mr. Ricky Hudson, Mrs. Betty Rogers, Miss Sabrina Bell, Mrs. Stacy Hartage and her husband, Mr. Gary Hartage, Mr. Bernard Rogers and his wife, Mrs. Angela Rogers, Mrs. Christine Dalster and her husband, Mr. Charles Dalster, Mrs. Laquita Williams and her husband, Mr. Billy Williams, Miss Makiba Cunningham, Mr. Kendora Rouse and his wife, Mrs. Stephanie Rouse, Mr. Alex Peterson, Mr. Tony Rogers, Mr. Bernard Brooks, Miss Satilla Collins, Miss LaShawn Hester, Miss Marcia Hester, and Mr. Cedric Hessler and his wife, Mr. Sean Hessler, her mother-in-law, Mrs. Tanya Goodman, her brothers-in-law, Mr. Kelvin Brown and Mr. Antonio Barton, and his wife, Mrs. Kansas Barton, her beloved nieces and nephews, many cousins, other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends survive. Mrs. LaPortia Rogers Brown, age 31, of 507 West Peachtree Avenue, Cordele, Georgia. Mr. Marcus Jones, age 63, of 161 Green Acres Road, Rochelle, Georgia, died Saturday, September 11th at the Chris Regional Hospital in Cordele, Georgia. The funeral service for Mr. Marcus Jones, age 63, was held Saturday, September 18th, graveside at the Piney Grove Baptist Church Cemetery in Rochelle, Georgia. Dr. Sandra L. Dixon officiated. Survivors include his beloved and devoted sisters, Mrs. Anna McClendon of Pineview, Georgia, Mrs. Maxine Troop of Mount Vernon, Georgia, and Miss Carla Kinghorn of Rochelle, Georgia. His beloved aunt, Mrs. Inell Reedy, and her husband, Mr. Robert Reedy of Atlanta, Georgia, and Miss Leslie Tillman of Laverne, Alabama. A special friend, Miss Sandra Grace of Rochelle, Georgia. His close friends, Mr. Durrell McBurrows of Rochelle, Georgia, Mr. Bobby Brown of Pineview, Georgia, Pastor Janice Hardy of McDonald, Georgia, and Deacon Eddie Coney of Rochelle, Georgia. A host of other relatives and many, many sorrowing friends survive. Mr. Marcus Jones, age 63, of 161 Green Acres Road, Rochelle, Georgia. Again, the family of Miss Eveline Cheese of Rochelle, Georgia, the family of Miss Stacy D. Buckins of Americus, Georgia, the family of Miss LaPortia Rogers Brown of Cordele, Georgia, the family of Mr. Marcus Jones of Rochelle, Georgia, would like to thank their many friends for all of the many kindnesses shown to them during the hours of sorrow and bereavement during the past week. May God bless each of you, is their prayer. The J.W. Williams Funeral Directors serving Cordele and Diana were in charge of each of these arrangements during the past week. And now, it is certainly with the deepest regret that we make the following announcements. Mr. Alex Gerard Peterson, age 37, of 21499 Highway 27 West, Vienna, Georgia, died Sunday, September 12th at his residence in Vienna, Georgia. Survivors include his loving and devoted mother, Miss Elizabeth Peterson of Vienna, Georgia, his beloved and caring father, Mr. Will Hudson Sr., and his wife, Mrs. Margaret Hudson of Cordele, Georgia, his beloved sisters, Mrs. Tanya Hudson, Mrs. Raquella Singleton, Miss Jaquila Singleton, Miss Natalie Cross, Miss April Cross, Miss Daniela Cross, Miss Ronisha Grace, and her husband, Mr. Johnny Grace, all of Cordele, Georgia. Miss Victoria Hudson of Texas, Miss Sharita Glenn and her husband, Sir Greg Glenn of Vienna, Georgia. His beloved brother, Mr. Rodriguez Peterson, and his wife, Mrs. Tamika Peterson, Mr. Will Hudson Jr., Mr. Ricky Hudson, all of Cordele, Georgia. His loving aunts and uncles, Mrs. Mary Harris and her husband, Mr. Henry Harris, Mr. Wendell Peterson Jr. of Vienna, Georgia, Miss Gloria Peterson of Albany, Georgia, Mr. Walter Peterson of Atlanta, Georgia, and Mr. Johnny Peterson Jr. of Savannah, Georgia. His beloved great aunts and great uncles, Mrs. Willie Maud Douglas of Detroit, Michigan, and Miss Marion Peterson of Albany, Georgia. A host of cousins, to include his special cousin, Miss Takara Fullwood and Miss Takara Peterson, both of Cordele, Georgia. A host of other relatives and many, many sorrowing friends, to include his special friend, Miss Tasha Toots of Warner Robins, Georgia, survived Mr. Alex Gerard Peterson, age 37, of 21499 Highway 27 West, Vienna, Georgia. The funeral service for Mr. Alex Gerard Peterson, age 37, will be held today, Sunday, September 19th, at 11 a.m., graveside at the Macedonia Baptist Church Cemetery, Drayton Community, Vienna, Georgia. The Reverend Louis Burden will officiate. Mrs. Jessica Sharp Lively, age 35, of 1206 Blackshear Road, Cordele, Georgia, died Sunday, September 12th, at the Chris Regional Hospital in Cordele, Georgia. Survivors include a living and devoted husband, Mr. Reginald Lively of Cordele, Georgia, her loving and precious children, Miss Serenity Lively, Mr. Reginald Lively III, and Miss Sarana Lively, all of Cordele, Georgia. Her loving mother, Miss Helen Franklin of Miami, Florida. Her beloved father, Mr. John Sharp. Her loving and devoted sisters, Miss Keita Franklin of Miami, Florida. Miss Kimberly Burleson of Killeen, Texas. Miss Daphne Sharp of Washington, Miss Sokola Chamber of Tampa, Florida, and Miss Kira Edwards of Florida. Mr. Raymond Levy Jr. of Texas, Mr. John Sharp Jr., and Mr. Joshua Chambers, both of Miami, Florida. Mr. Jonathan Paula of Hawaii. Her beloved grandparents, Mrs. Dorothy Sharp of Miami, Florida, Mr. Johnny and Mrs. Juanita Talbert of Cordele, Georgia. Her loving aunts and uncles, Miss Linda Weaver of Waco, Texas, Mrs. Deborah Fisher and her husband, Gary Fisher of Temple, Texas, Miss Carolyn Sharp, Miss Joanne Sharp, Miss Trinity Sharp, and Mr. Leon Sharp, all of Miami, Florida. Mrs. Valerie Sharp and her husband, Mr. Walter Sharp, of Walterboro, North Carolina. 4 sisters-in-law, 4 brothers-in-law, a host of nieces and nephews, many cousins, other relatives, and many sorrowing friends, to include our special friends, Miss Maya Savage of Cordele, Georgia. Survived Miss Jessica Sharp Lively, age 35, of 1206 Blackshear Road, Cordele, Georgia. The funeral service for Mrs. Jessica Sharp Lively, age 35, will be held Wednesday, September 22nd at 11 a.m. graveside at the Bethel Cemetery in Cordele, Georgia. Minister Marcus McClintock will officiate. The public walk-up visitation will be Tuesday, September 21st from 1 until 5 p.m. at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home. Mrs. Bridget Nicole Thompson Fullwood, age 43, of 3484 Georgia Highway 159, Pitts, Georgia, died Wednesday, September 15, at the South Georgia Medical Center in Valdosta, Georgia. Survivors include her loving and devoted children, Mr. Octavia Thompson, Mrs. Shanteria Thompson, Mr. Michael Fullwood, and Mr. Martavius Fullwood, all of Pitts, Georgia. A beloved grandson, little Kahir Thompson of Pitts, Georgia. Her loving and devoted parents, Mr. Frazier Curtis Thompson Jr. and Mrs. Bobby Jean Lewis Thompson of Pitts, Georgia. A beloved sister, Miss Kendra Lumpkin, and her husband, Mr. Terrell Lumpkin of Haynesville, Georgia. Her beloved brothers, Mr. Frazier Curtis Thompson III and his wife, Mrs. Erica Thompson of Pitts, Georgia, and Mr. Michael Kendrick of Rome, Georgia. Her beloved aunts and uncles, Mrs. Murtis Lewis of Pitts, Georgia, Miss Mary Ann Lewis of Vienna, Georgia, Mrs. Louise Bell of Hawkinsville, Georgia, Mrs. Sandra Lane and her husband, Mr. Myron Lane of McDonald, Georgia, Miss Mary Slaughter and Miss Ceola Ritchie, both of Decatur, Georgia. Deacon M.L. Lewis and his wife, Mrs. Willie Mae Lewis of Rochelle, Georgia, Mr. Edmund Lewis and his wife, Mrs. Barbara Lewis of Jonesboro, Georgia, Mr. Pharrell Lewis and his wife, Mrs. Lucille Lewis of Warner Robins, Georgia, Mr. Curtis Lewis and his wife, Mrs. Cynthia Lewis of Stockbridge, Georgia, Mr. Ronald Thompson and his wife, Mrs. Annette Thompson of McDonald, Georgia, Mr. Melvin Thompson of Cordele, Georgia, Mr. Carl Thompson and his wife, Mrs. Respect Thompson, Mr. Sammy Thompson, both of Pitts, Georgia, Mr. Forrest Thompson of Hampton, Georgia, a host of nieces and nephews, many cousins, other relatives, and many sorrowing friends, to include Mr. Stacy Manning of Byronville, Georgia, the father of her children, Mr. Michael Fullwood, and his mother, Mrs. Vivian Fullwood of Cordele, Georgia. Survived Mrs. Bridget Nicole Thompson Fullwood, age 43, of 3484 Georgia Highway 159, Pitts, Georgia. The funeral service for Mrs. Bridget Nicole Thompson Fullwood, age 43, will be held Wednesday, September 22nd at 3 p.m. graveside at the Spring Hill Baptist Church Cemetery in Tippettville, Georgia, with the pastor, Reverend Choice Cobb Sr., officiating. Mrs. Margie Leverson Green, age 78, of 308 East 13th Avenue, Cordele, Georgia, died Wednesday, September 15th at Navison Health in Macon, Georgia. Survivors include her loving and devoted children, Miss Teresa Simmons, Mrs. Roxanne Edmonds, and her husband, Mr. Joseph Edmond, Mrs. Milana Ramsey and her husband, Mr. Arnold Ramsey, Mrs. Enora Leverson, and Mr. Robin Leverson. 15 beloved grandchildren, 28 great-grandchildren, a host of nieces, nephews, cousins, other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends survive. Mrs. Margie Leverson Green, age 78, of 308 East 13th Avenue, Cordele, Georgia. The funeral service for Mrs. Margie Leverson Green will be held Friday, September 24th at 2 p.m. at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home Portico in Cordele, Georgia. The Reverend Isaac H. Owens, pastor of the Mount Calvary Baptist Church, will officiate. The public visitation will be Friday, September 24th, from 12:15 p.m. until the hour of the funeral. Mr. L.C. Butts, age 94, of Quitman, Georgia, died Sunday, September 12th, at the Chris Regional Nursing and Rehabilitation Center in Cordele, Georgia. Survivors include a host of loving and devoted nieces and nephews, many great-nieces and great-nephews, other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends survive. Mr. L.C. Butts, age 94, of Quitman, Georgia. The funeral service for Mr. L.C. Butts, age 94, will be held Saturday, September 25th at 10 a.m. graveside at the Pleasant Hill Baptist Church Cemetery, Hatley Community, Cordele, Georgia, with the minister selected officiating. Mr. Michael George Johnson, age 47, of 108 Peggy Ann Drive, Americus, Georgia, died Thursday, September 16, at the Phoebe Sumter Medical Center in Americus, Georgia. Survivors include his loving and devoted wife, Mrs. Tanya Watts Johnson of Americus, Georgia, his loving and caring children, Mrs. Alexandra Watts of Palm Coast, Florida, Miss Lorraine Johnson of Americus, Georgia, his beloved sisters, Mrs. Rosalind Johnson Williams and her husband, Mr. Ronaldo Williams, and Mrs. Roxana McLeod, both of Holly Hill, Florida. His beloved brothers, Mr. Willie James Johnson Jr. and his wife, Mrs. Tracy Johnson, and Mr. Eric Johnson and his wife, Mrs. Tina Johnson, both of Holly Hill, Florida. His beloved parents-in-law, the Reverend Jesse and Mrs. Louise Watts of DeSoto, Georgia. His brothers-in-law, Mr. Curtis West and his wife, Mrs. Tammy West of Cordele, Georgia. Mr. James McKenzie and his wife, Mrs. Mariana McKenzie, and Mr. Jesse Watts Jr. and his wife, Mrs. Kim Watts, both of Americus, Georgia. A host of other relatives and many, many sorrowing friends survive, to include a special friend, Mr. Patrick Reese of Marietta, Georgia, survived. Mr. Michael George Johnson, age 47, of 106 Peggy Ann Drive, Americus, Georgia. The memorial service for Mr. Michael George Johnson, age 47, will be held Saturday, September 25th at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home Portico in Cordele, Georgia, with the minister selected officiating. Mr. Danny West, age 63, of 306 First Street, Unadilla, Georgia, died Thursday, September 16, at the Chris Regional Hospital in Cordele, Georgia. Survivors include his loving and devoted children, Miss Tiffany West and Mr. Jeremy West, his beloved brothers and sister, Mr. Ray Charles Ingram, Mrs. Irena Gordon, Miss Ruby Thorpe, Miss Della Daniels, and Miss Mary Dora Sip, a host of nieces, nephews, cousins, other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends survive. Mr. Danny West, age 63, of 306 First Street, Unadilla, Georgia. The funeral service for Mr. Danny West will be announced at a later date, pending the completion of the arrangements. The J.W. Williams Funeral Directors serving Cordele and Vienna are in charge of each of these arrangements during this week. Friends, that conclude our funeral notices for this morning. And as always, we do remind you concerning our pre-funeral arrangements planning available at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home, with packages available with a single pay, a 3-year pay, a 5-year pay, and a 10-year pay. So please stop by and talk with us concerning your pre-funeral arrangements needs available at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home. And also whole life insurance is available at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home.
And now for our announcements. You're invited to worship with the members of the New Poplar Spring Baptist Church today. They extend you a very cordial invitation to worship with them. You may join them by calling 253-993-3761. Pastor Johnny Dean, pastor. You're invited to worship with the Spring Hill Baptist Church today. Services will begin at 11 o'clock a.m. You're invited to drive up and worship with them. Sister Mary Ann Lewis is the secretary. Deacon Sam Anderson is the chairman of deacons. Reverend Choice Cobb Sr. is the pastor. Christ Chapel Unadilla Weekly Food Pantry is open every Saturday from 9 a.m. until 12 o'clock noon. Mrs. Jeanette Taylor is the coordinator. You're invited to worship with the Greater Mars Tabernacle Baptist Church today, as they will have worship on the grounds beginning at 9 o'clock a.m. Tuesday midday prayer conference will begin at 12 o'clock noon. Thursday prayer meeting and Bible study is held at 6 o'clock p.m. The call-in number for the conference call is 229-329-7611. Sister Mother Lucille Shazer, Church Mother, Deacon Arthur Parker, Chairman of Deacons, Dr. K.M. Williams is the pastor. The Emmanuel Missionary Baptist Church invites everyone to pull up and praise with them each Sunday beginning at 10 o'clock a.m. They are worshiping at 1818 U.S. Highway 41 North, Cordele. Reverend Gregory Williams is the pastor.
You're invited to worship with the St. King Baptist Church during their worship service beginning at 8 o'clock a.m. for the Hour of Power worship service that begins at 9 o'clock a.m. and for Sunday school that begins at 10:15 a.m. Reverend Woody C. Burnham is the pastor. Reverend Joyce Daniels is the co-pastor. The Mount Zion First African Baptist Church conference call schedule is as follows. Sunday morning at 10 o'clock a.m., prayer Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 12 o'clock noon. Bible study is held each Wednesday at 5 o'clock p.m. The conference call-in number is 515-604-9765. The access code is 288180. Deacon Joe Wedges is the chairman of deacons. Dr. Dan James III is the pastor. You're invited to worship at the Gethsemane Baptist Church today as they will be celebrating the church's 105th church anniversary and the 3rd anniversary of the pastor, Reverend Cecil Straughter. The service will begin at 10:30 a.m. on the grounds of the church. Everyone is asked to please wear a face mask. Deacon Johnny Wilson, chairman of deacons, Reverend Cecil Straughter is the pastor. You're invited to worship with the Mount Calvary Baptist Church today on Facebook Live. The service will begin at 10:30 a.m. Everyone has a cordial invitation to attend. Deacon Leon Spears, chairman of deacons, Reverend Isaac Owens is the pastor. The M.D. Whitus Medical Institute, formerly known as the A.S. Clark School, will be conducting both the Pfizer and Moderna COVID-19 vaccine on Wednesday, September 22nd from 10 a.m. until 5 o'clock p.m. for ages 12 and over. Please go by and get your vaccine if you have not been vaccinated. This comes from Dr. Matthew W. Whitus, MD, and the M.D. Whitus Medical Institute. Wilcox County Head Start is taking applications for preschoolers. For more information, please call Ms. Donna Kinkins at 229-365-2341 or 478-922-4464. Put up the picture. I'd like to take this opportunity this morning to say congratulations to Deacon Ricky Dawson Jr., who will be sworn in as the Crisp County Coroner of Crisp County on Thursday, September 23rd at 11 o'clock a.m. at the Crisp County Courthouse. The ceremony will be held outside. Again, we congratulate Deacon Dawson, and we pray God's richest blessings as you continue in this next endeavor. Congratulations. That will conclude our announcements for today.
Now for dedication. Our first selection this morning is dedicated to the following. In loving memory of Mrs. Estella Bowers, who would have celebrated her birthday September the 19th. Dedication requested by her beloved son, Mr. Dewey Bowers and Mr. Robert Bowers. Precious memory lingers still. In loving memory of beloved Deacon Benjamin Miles, who would have celebrated his birthday September 18th. Dedication requested by the Miles family, gone but not forgotten, Deacon Benjamin Miles. Our first selection this morning is dedicated to the following. Happy anniversary to Mr. Ike and Mrs. Yolanda Grant, who celebrated their anniversary Wednesday, September 15th. Dedication requested by their beloved children and grandchildren. God bless your union and keep it strong. Mr. Ike and Mrs. Yolanda Grant on their anniversary, September the 15th. Our first selection this morning is dedicated to the following. Happy birthday to Mr. Freeman Grace, who celebrated his birthday Tuesday, September 14th. Dedication requested by his beloved family. Happy birthday to Mrs. Sophia Levant Wilson, who celebrated her birthday September 14th. Happy birthday to Mrs. Melville Haddock West, who celebrated her birthday Tuesday, September 14th. Happy birthday to Mr. Christopher Jones, who celebrated his birthday Wednesday, September 15th. Happy birthday to Mrs. Flossie West, who celebrated her birthday Thursday, September 16th. Happy birthday to Mrs. Trinica Mapp, who celebrated her birthday Thursday, September 16th. Happy birthday to Mr. Dewey Jones, who celebrated his birthday Friday, September 17th. Happy birthday to Mrs. Martha Lester Harris, who celebrated her birthday Saturday, September 18th. Happy birthday to Mrs. Juanita Montford, who celebrated her birthday Saturday, September 18. And happy birthday to little Poppy Ruth Muhammad, who celebrated her birthday Saturday, September 18. And special birthday wishes goes out to former City Commissioner A.J. Rivers, who celebrated his 96th birthday on Saturday, September the 18th. Dedication requested by his beloved wife, Mrs. Vera Mae Rivers, the entire Rivers family, and all of the members of the Mount Calvary Baptist Church. Former Commissioner, Vice Chairman for many years of the City of Cordele, City Commissioner Mr. A.J. Rivers on his 96th birthday. Happy birthday, and many, many more. And special birthday wishes goes out to City of Cordele Fire Chief Mr. Augusta Telfair, who celebrated his birthday Saturday, September the 18th. Dedication requested by all of his children, grandchildren, and the entire Telfair family to the City of Cordele Fire Chief Mr. Augusta Telfair, birthday Saturday, September 18th. And happy birthday to Mrs. Melissa Lester Jones, who is celebrating her birthday today, Sunday. Happy birthday to my classmate, Mrs. Brenda Napple Cross, who is celebrating her birthday on today. And happy birthday to Mr. Greg Gaston, who is celebrating his birthday on today. And again, happy birthday to our beloved Mrs. Easter May Sanders, who celebrated her birthday during this past week. And congratulations to Brother Ricky Dawson for being appointed as coroner of the City of Cordele, of Chris County. It is certainly with the deepest regret that we make the following announcements. Mr. Alex Gerard Peterson, age 37, of 21499 Highway 27 West, Vienna, Georgia, died Sunday, September 12th at his residence in Cordele, Georgia. The funeral service for Mr. Alex Gerard Peterson, age 37, will be held today, Sunday, September 19th, at 11 a.m. graveside at the Macedonia Baptist Church Cemetery, Drayton Community, Vienna, Georgia. The Reverend Louis Burden will officiate. Mrs. Jessica Sharp Lively, age 35, of 1206 Blackshear Road, Cordele, Georgia, died Sunday, September 12th at the Chris Regional Hospital in Cordele, Georgia. The funeral service for Mrs. Jessica Sharp Lively, age 35, will be held Wednesday, September 22nd at 10 a.m., at 11 a.m., graveside at Bethel Cemetery in Cordele, Georgia, with the Reverend Marcus officiating. The public walk-up visitation will be Tuesday, September 21st from 1 until 5 p.m. at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home. Mrs. Bridget Nicole Thompson Fullwood, age 43, of 3484 Georgia Highway 159, Pitts, Georgia, died Wednesday, September 15th at the South Georgia Medical Center in Valdosta, Georgia. The funeral service for Mrs. Bridget Nicole Thompson Fullwood, age 43, will be held Wednesday, September 22nd at 3 p.m. graveside at the Spring Hill Baptist Church Cemetery in Tibbettville, Georgia. The pastor, Reverend Charles Cobb Sr., will officiate. Mrs. Margie Levison Green, age 78, of 308 East 13th Avenue, Cordele, Georgia, died Wednesday, September 15th at Navison Health in Macon, Georgia. The funeral service for Mrs. Margie Levison Green, age 78, will be held Friday, September 24th at 2 p.m. at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home Portico in Cordele, Georgia. The Reverend Isaac H. Owens, pastor of the Mount Calvary Baptist Church, will officiate. The public walk-up visitation will be Friday, September 24th from 12:15 p.m. until the hour of the funeral. Mr. L.C. Butts, age 94, of Quitman, Georgia, died Sunday, September 12th at the Chris Regional Nursing and Rehabilitation Center in Cordele, Georgia. The funeral service for Mr. L.C. Butts, age 94, will be held Saturday, September 25th at 10 a.m. graveside at the Pleasant Hill Baptist Church Cemetery, Hatley Community, Cordele, Georgia, with the minister selected officiating. Mr. Michael George Johnson, age 47, of 106 Peggy Ann Drive, Americus, Georgia, died Thursday, September 16th at the Phoebe Sumter Medical Center in Americus, Georgia. The memorial service for Mr. Michael George Johnson, age 47, will be held Saturday, September 25th at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home Portico in Cordele, Georgia, with the minister selected officiating. Mr. Danny West, age 63, of 306 First Street, Unadilla, Georgia, died Thursday, September 16, at the Chris Regional Hospital in Cordele, Georgia. The funeral service for Mr. Danny West, age 63, will be announced at a later date, pending the completion of the arrangements. The J.W. Williams funeral directors serving Cordele and Diana are in charge of each of these arrangements during this week. Our selection this morning is dedicated to the bereaved families whose loved one was laid to rest during the past week. The family are Miss Everline Cheese of Rochelle, Georgia. The family, Miss Stacy D. Buckins of Americus, Georgia. The family of Mrs. LaPortia Rogers Brown of Cordele, Georgia. The family of Mr. Marcus Jones of Rochelle, Georgia. This selection is dedicated to the bereaved families whose loved ones will be laid to rest during this week. The family of Mr. Alex Gerard Peterson of Vienna, Georgia. The family of Mrs. Jessica Sharp Lively of Cordele, Georgia. The family of Mrs. Bridget Nicole Thompson Fullwood of Pitts, Georgia. The family of Mrs. Margie Leverson Green of Cordele, Georgia. The family of Mr. L.C. Butts of Cordele, Georgia. The family of Mr. Michael George Johnson of Americus, Georgia. The family of Mr. Danny West of Unadilla, Georgia. This election is dedicated to all of the sick and shut-in, to all patients in the local and surrounding hospitals, nursing homes, and rehabilitation centers, to our beloved ministers and their devoted family members, to all retired educators, to the men and women serving in our armed forces, both stateside and abroad, to all veterans, and to everyone who listens to our program on each Sunday morning. It's a pleasure for us to bring it to you. Our program goes out in memory of our past president, Dr. Napoleon Williams, goes out to my wife, Mrs. Calandra Wilkerson Parker, to my son, Jai Wilkerson Parker. This selection is dedicated to my brother, retired Chief Master Sergeant Norman F. Dexter, and his wife, Dr. Gwendolyn Maxine Dexter, and their grandson, Noble. To my sister, Mrs. Manny Mae Johnson, better known as Sister Girl, and Mrs. Patsy Jackson and her husband, Mr. Jim Jackson of Cordele, Georgia. This selection goes out to my mother-in-law, Mrs. Billy Ann Hall, and family. This selection goes out to my nephew, Deacon Kenneth Smith, program chairman of the Greater Morris Tabernacle Missionary Baptist Church. Goes out to our pastor, Dr. K.M. Williams, and his wife, Sister Kathy Williams, pastor of the Greater Morris Tabernacle Missionary Baptist Church and moderator of the Gun Creek Missionary Baptist Association. Again, invite you to worship this morning on the grounds of the Greater Morris Tabernacle Missionary Baptist Church at 9 a.m. this morning. This selection goes out to the mother of the church there, Mother Lucille Shazer, age 108. Mother Lucille Shazer, age 108, who will be in attendance this morning, be it the Lord's will. This selection goes out especially to Mrs. Maggie Hodge Outlaw on her retirement after 53 years of serving this community as a registered nurse for the Chris Regional Hospital, serving this community for 53 years. And we say congratulations to her and best wishes during her retirement. And this selection is also dedicated to her beloved mother on this morning. Our selection this morning goes out to Mr. Justin Corbin and family, Mrs. Loretta Fields and family, Mrs. Esther Johnson and family, Mr. Ricky Hardeman and family, Mr. Philip Stimbridge and family, Mrs. Ola Lofton and family, Mrs. Anna Ruth Jordan and family, Vienna, Georgia, Mrs. Mary Frances Davis and family, Mrs. Jackie Lattimore and family, Deacon Lonnie Clayton and family, Mrs. Neffy Harvey and family, Mother Easter May Byram and family, and the entire Byram family. This selection goes out to all our friends who tuned in by way of Facebook this morning, and we said thanks to each of you. Goes out to my neighbor, Mrs. Theron Jones and family, and the entire Jones and Talbot family, Mother Dorothy Talbot and family, Mr. Johnny and Mrs. Juanita Talbot and family, and the entire Talbot family, Miss Willie Mae Leary and family of Hatley, Georgia, and the Hillman family of Ashburn, Turner County, Georgia. I was trying to do
praise us tonight in the room. Did you come to have a good time tonight? Did you come to give God the glory? Somebody make some noise! Oh, y'all too quiet. I said somebody scream! Do we have any champions?
Yes, I'm going to war. Thank you for joining us this morning. We hope you've enjoyed our program. Tune in again on next Sunday morning. In your time of need, contact the competent, capable, and dependable staff at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home.